Okay, Richard. What subjects did you take at school?
Well, at school, I did the usual selection of, we call them O-levels, you call them GCSEs, and I did the usual. Most of them were compulsory in those days. There were comparatively few that we chose, and I wasn't very good at that level. And something must have happened over the summer holidays after my GCSEs, because I started working hard, much to the amazement of my parents. So when it came to A-levels, I took geography, history, economics, and what they used to call general studies, which was great because you couldn't revise for it. But we had really interesting Tuesday afternoons where they would take us on trips. For example, the local abattoir, the local prison. We'd have speakers like the local Member of Parliament. But really they were just filling in a Tuesday afternoon, because the whole thing about general studies was that you couldn't revise for it. It was to get people's general knowledge. And I went to university. I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to Oxford, and no member of my family had ever been to university, so it was all a bit surprising to all of us at the time. And I met the admissions tutor once at dinner, and I said to him, what do you look for in people that you're interviewing? And he said, well, we think the general studies course, the results are really interesting. Well, we all thought it was a bit of a joke because it was random questions. But apparently they took the view, and I think it's probably true today, is that good schools can coach people very well for academic subjects by a combination of a student's own interest in a subject, but also, of course, the lessons and everything else. And schools are very good at that. But the general studies, no one could be coached for. And that subject, I think, fell into abeyance as targets and gradings and Ofsteds and everything became more popular. But I always thought it was a good thing to do.
Yeah. So what was your early life like? So how did you grow up?
Well, I was brought up in Leeds. All my family are from Leeds, although ironically they all drifted down here because I was the first. But no, my father was a shopkeeper, and we had a family shop, and we all worked in it on Saturdays and holidays, which gave me an interest in business. Very loving parents. I must say, neither of my parents were educated in any way. Both of them had left school at 14, but they really believed in the values of education and hard work. My father was not a strict disciplinarian. My mother was. In fact, my mother is, who I shall be seeing when I leave here. My father unfortunately died 6 years ago, but I'd say quite a conventional kind of upbringing. I have one brother and one sister, and we were quite a close family. Didn't have lots of cousins and people like that because both my parents didn't have a lot of brothers and sisters. But I have absolutely no complaints at all about my childhood. It was a secure one. And I was left really, even when I was not studying very hard at school, I was very rarely told off. I think if it was left to my mum, I probably would have been. But my mother of the two, my mother was the disciplinarian.
So how did it go from business to politics?
Well, when I was at university, and you'll find out yourself, there was a lot of pressure on being in an establishment career. So I did law at university, not because I had any interest in law at all, but because I thought somewhat naively it might lead to a job. And I didn't really know much about it, and you didn't get that much advice in those days at school, or at least I didn't. Probably because the teachers were amazed that I could get to any form of university, let alone to Oxford. And so I did law, and I wasn't very interested in it. All I really wanted to do was make money. The reason I wanted to make money was not because I had aspirations to big boys' toys like boats and planes and all that kind of stuff, Ferraris, but because I wanted a form of independence. I had this kind of, almost like a feeling that I didn't want people to boss me about.
So you're very determined.
I was determined to get this independence. And, I've done things in my life which many people with reasonably good school and graduate from a decent university, I've driven minicabs, I've had a market stall, didn't bother me. Why? Because I could decide when I got up in the morning and when I finished work. The status side of it didn't particularly bother me. So that was the number one thing. That's what got me into business as opposed to politics. Politics is very hierarchical. You can be sacked left, right and centre, either by the electorate every 4 or 5 years, or, well, I don't really count that as a sacking really, but I do count if you're a minister and David Cameron doesn't like you, or this one, then obviously you're out. Well, that is not an attraction to me. I believe I'm doing it as a form of public service. So I wasn't really interested in being a politician, not because I hated it. In fact, I got into politics at university because I was so bored with law, and politics really interested me. But after that, the real drive was to try and get this financial independence, so as somewhat crudely not to be pushed around. I mean, I just wanted, the day I paid off my mortgage, I was really happy. Rather than getting a huge house with another mortgage, I thought, great, no one can do anything, it's our house sort of thing. A bit basic really, but that was certainly my thing. So politics came later on.
What sacrifices have you made to become an MP?
Well, I've sacrificed my life in a way. This sounds dramatic, but my life doesn't belong to me anymore. I don't complain about that, because you're basically saying I am owned by 80,000 people in Watford. They pay my salary. They've a right. I'm not saying they've a right to come inside my house, but basically they've a right to expect a certain standard of life. So for most people, your duty as citizens is to basically obey the law, pay your taxes, obey the law. Anything beyond that is a question of your own personal values, morality. Some people have religion, some people don't. Some people are brought up with certain values, some people unfortunately are not. But the duty of a citizen is to obey the law. If you're in any form of public life, I think you have to lead by example. So if I was the sort of person to go clubbing in Watford and get completely blind drunk on a Saturday night and throw up all over the place, I couldn't. I say that as an example, because I'm too old for all that anyway. But the point I'm making is, you're saying that I don't really have a private life. For example, if I go to Sainsbury's on Sunday afternoon because we've run out of something, 3 or 4 people will come up to me and ask me things. Now, I don't mind, but I can't say, like if that happened to your doctor, the doctor would say, look, politely, it's Sunday afternoon, if you phone the surgery in the morning, I'll try and fit you in. We can't say that.
Can you describe your working week? So, for example, what you do usually every week.
Yes. Well, it depends all on whether Parliament is sitting or not. So, like a true politician, I'll give you a waffly answer, but it's like in school terms, it would be in term time. Well, I'm in Parliament always Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday, which means really I don't leave till 10 or 11 at night, so you don't get home till midnight or whatever. And that's fairly consistent, because we have apart from the voting, the debates we get involved, we have select committees, bill scrutiny committees, meetings to do with bits of legislation we're working on, all things like that. So it's fairly solid. So usually Monday, Tuesdays and Wednesdays are that. Thursdays, I'm either in Parliament or in Watford, depending. I try not to be in Parliament on Thursday, but it depends what kind of business, because we see a week in advance what business is going to be discussed. Always Friday and Saturday, I'm doing my constituency work. And that's varied. Saturday mornings, for example, are surgeries, which are just like doctor's surgeries. People come, I hold them in the public library in Watford, and people come with their problems, one after the other. They're booked in, and then some people come without an appointment. So obviously if someone doesn't turn up, I slot them in, or they don't mind waiting until, afterwards. And that can be quite depressing, because you want to help people, but often you can't, because it might be to do with housing or benefits or an experience they've had at the hospital, or to do with the roads, anything you like. Sometimes quite tragic cases to do with child custody and things like that.
Just finally, what do you think was the worst point in politics that you've experienced?
My personal worst was I was absolutely appalled at the Parliament's view on the military action in Syria last year, because I felt that we had, as civilised people who are fortunate to live the way we do, to stand by and idly see children gassed and attacked with chemical weapons, and Parliament to vote to do nothing about it. I actually was quite ashamed about. Normally, I don't get involved in foreign politics, and luckily most foreign affairs are quite consensual. They're certainly not on a party political basis. But I just thought of all the people that would have died in the last year, and that by voting the way we as a parliament did, not me personally, and not what David Cameron wanted, but I actually felt quite ashamed because I felt it's our duty to try and do something. And what we were trying to do was a limited amount of military action, not with our troops even, to stop this. So that for me was the low point.
Thank you, Richard.
Very nice. Thank you very much for having me.